The dining room had never felt so cold. Elijah Grant sat at the mahogany table where he'd eaten thousands of meals, where he'd celebrated birthdays and endured lectures about grades, where life had always made sense in its predictable middle-class rhythm. But tonight, the air itself seemed different, heavier, charged with something unspoken that made his skin prickle with dread. His mother, Margaret, he supposed he should start thinking of her differently now, sat with her hands folded so tightly her knuckles had gone white. His father, Robert, stood by the window, his back turned, shoulders rigid as iron. The sunset bleeding through the glass painted everything in shades of amber and dying light. "We need to talk," Robert said finally, his voice stripped of its usual warmth. Elijah's 18th birthday had been 3 days ago. A small celebration. Cake from the grocery store. A card with $50 inside. Nothing unusual. Nothing to suggest his entire existence was about to fracture like dropped glass. About what? Elijah asked, though some ancient instinct deep in his chest already knew this was the conversation. The one he'd sensed lurking in the spaces between their glances his whole life. Margaret's eyes glistened. "We should have told you years ago. We tried. God knows we tried to find the right time. But there never was one." "Told me what?" Robert turned from the window, and Elijah saw something he'd never seen before in his father's face. Not quite guilt, not quite shame, but something tangled and dark that lived between those emotions. "You're not our biological son," Robert said, each word dropping like stones into still water. "We adopted you when you were 3 days old." The words hung there, reshaping reality. Elijah felt his breath catch, felt the room tilt slightly as if the foundation of the house had shifted. 18 years. 18 years of believing he knew who he was, where he came from, why he had his father's stubbornness or his mother's green eyes. Except he didn't have their eyes at all. Did he? His were hazel, flecked with gold. Different. Always different. Why now? Elijah's voice came out hollow. "Why tell me this now?" Margaret stood abruptly, her chair scraping against hardwood. "Because you're an adult now. Because there are things you need to know. Legal things." Legal things? The phrase sounded absurd, corporate, completely disconnected from the nuclear bomb they just detonated in his life. Robert moved to the sideboard, pulled out an envelope. Cream-colored, expensive-looking, with a law firm's embossed letterhead Elijah couldn't quite read from where he sat. "This came 2 weeks ago. We've been trying to figure out how to handle it." 2 weeks. Elijah's mind reeled. "You've known for 2 weeks and you're just—" "We were protecting you," Margaret interrupted, tears streaming freely now. "We've always been protecting you." "From what?" "From knowing the truth. From knowing who I actually am." "From them," Robert said sharply. "From the people who didn't want you, who gave you up like you were nothing." The cruelty of it struck Elijah like a physical blow. He stood, the chair toppling behind him. "So what, you've been waiting until I turned 18 to dump this on me and kick me out? Is that the plan?" "No." Margaret reached for him, but he stepped back. "Elijah, please, you don't understand." "Then make me understand." His voice cracked, years of unspoken questions suddenly roaring to the surface. "Make me understand why I always felt like I didn't quite fit. Why you'd both get quiet sometimes when I asked about baby pictures. Why are there only photos of me from age 1 onward?" The silence that followed was devastating. Robert thrust the envelope toward him. "Just read it, please." Elijah snatched it, his hands trembling. Inside was a letter on heavyweight paper, typed in formal legal language that swam before his eyes. He forced himself to focus, to read the words that would change everything. "Dear Mr. Elijah Grant, this firm represents the estate of Jonathan Michael Ashford and Victoria Louise Ashford, deceased. Per the terms of their last will and testament, executed 17 years and 9 months ago, we are required to contact you upon reaching your 18th birthday. You are hereby notified that you are the sole beneficiary of a trust fund established in your name, currently valued at $85 million. $85 million. The number didn't compute. Elijah read it again, and again. 85 million. The zeros seemed to multiply, meaningless and impossible. This is some kind of joke, he whispered. It's not a joke, Robert said quietly. We had it verified. It's real. Your biological parents, they were wealthy, very wealthy, and they left everything to you. Elijah's legs gave out. He sank to the floor, back against the wall, the letter trembling in his grip. Who were they? What happened to them? Margaret knelt beside him, keeping a careful distance. We don't know much. The adoption was private, arranged through lawyers. We were told your mother died in childbirth. Your father, he couldn't cope. He arranged the adoption and then, her voice broke. He took his own life 6 months later. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The weight of it crushed the air from Elijah's lungs. Parents he'd never known. A mother who died bringing him into the world. A father so devastated he'd chosen death over raising his only child. And money, an incomprehensible fortune left like an apology, like compensation for abandonment. Why didn't you tell me? Elijah asked again, but softer now, the anger draining into something that felt like grief. Robert's face crumpled. For the first time in Elijah's memory, his father looked old, truly old, burdened by secrets that had aged him in ways visible only now. Because we were afraid, he admitted. Afraid you'd want to find them. Afraid you'd love them more than us. Afraid we'd lose you. And when did the money come into play? Elijah heard the edge in his own voice. We thought you'd leave, Margaret sobbed. We thought you'd take the money and never look back. We thought we'd lose you anyway. But at least this way, we'd have these last few days. The selfishness of it should have made Elijah furious. But instead, he felt only a vast, echoing emptiness. These people, flawed, frightened, human, had raised him. They'd packed his lunches and attended his soccer games and taught him to drive. They'd loved him in the only way they knew how, even as fear corroded that love from the inside. I need to be alone, Elijah said, standing. I need to think. He walked out of that dining room, past the family photos that now felt like beautiful lies, up the stairs to his bedroom. A space that suddenly seemed to belong to someone else, some previous version of himself who'd stopped existing the moment the truth broke through. Sleep didn't come. Elijah lay in the darkness, staring at ceiling shadows and trying to reconcile two impossible realities. At 3 a.m., he finally opened his laptop and searched the names from the letter. Jonathan and Victoria Ashford. The internet remembered them. Articles from 18 years ago detailed their story. A love affair that had captivated Boston's elite social circles. Jonathan Ashford, heir to a pharmaceutical fortune. Victoria Laurent, a French artist whose paintings sold for 6 figures. Their wedding had been in a chateau in Provence. Their life together had looked like something from a magazine. And then Victoria got pregnant. The articles grew darker. Complications during delivery. Emergency C-section. Mother didn't survive. The baby was born healthy but premature. Jonathan had disappeared from public life immediately. 6 months later, a brief obituary. Jonathan Michael Ashford, 34, died suddenly at his home. He is survived by numerous cousins and extended family. Died suddenly. The euphemism was clear. Elijah found photos, his mother's face, captured in gallery openings and charity galas, alive with creative fire. His father's eyes, serious and intelligent in business portraits. He studied their features, searching for himself in their faces. The curve of his jaw, maybe, the widow's peak at his hairline. Evidence of genetics, of blood connection to these beautiful strangers who'd created him and then vanished. At 6 a.m., as dawn crept across his windowsill, Elijah made a decision. He called the number on the law firm's letterhead. Hawthorne, Mitchell and Associates. A receptionist answered, sounding wide awake despite the hour. I need to speak with someone about the Ashford estate. My name is Elijah Grant. There was a brief pause. Then, 1 moment, please. The moment stretched into 2 minutes. Then a man's voice came on the line, older, measured, weighted with the authority of decades in law. Mr. Grant, this is Charles Hawthorne. I've been waiting for your call. I was your parents' attorney and the executor of their estate. I knew them both very well. Can you tell me about them? Elijah asked, his voice raw from sleeplessness and unshed tears. I need to know who they were. Not the public version. The real version. Charles was quiet for a moment. They were extraordinary people who experienced an extraordinary tragedy. Your mother, Victoria, she was luminous, talented beyond measure, with this laugh that could fill entire rooms. Your father adored her completely. When she died, he paused. Jonathan tried, Mr. Grant. He truly tried to be strong for you, but the grief was too much. He couldn't look at you without seeing her, without being reminded of everything he'd lost. Elijah's throat tightened. So he gave me away. He made arrangements for you to have the best possible life, Charles corrected gently. He personally vetted dozens of families. Robert and Margaret Grant, they were teachers. Modest income, but kind, stable, desperate for a child. Jonathan wanted you raised with love and normalcy, away from the tragedy that had consumed his world. And he ensured you'd be financially secure when you came of age. $85 million, Elijah said, the number still surreal. The principal was $50 million, the bulk of his liquid assets. The rest is 17 years of aggressive investment growth. There are properties too. The family home in Beacon Hill, cottage in Maine, investments in various companies, all waiting for you. Elijah stood, paced his small bedroom. What do I do with it? Whatever you wish, Charles said simply. But I'd like to meet with you. There are documents to sign, accounts to access, and there's something else. Something I was instructed to give you personally. They agreed to meet that afternoon at the firm's office in downtown Boston. The Hawthorne, Mitchell and Associates building was all glass and steel, its lobby decorated with abstract art that probably cost more than most houses. Elijah felt underdressed in his jeans and hoodie, hyper-aware of eyes tracking him as he approached the reception desk. Charles Hawthorne was a distinguished man in his 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His office overlooked the city, floor-to-ceiling windows framing Boston's skyline like a painting. Please sit, Charles gestured to a leather chair. Would you like coffee? Water? I'm fine, Elijah said, though he was anything but. Charles settled behind his desk, pulling out a file folder thick with documents. First, the practical matters. The trust fund is accessible immediately. I'll need you to sign here, here, and here. He guided Elijah through pages of legal language, explaining each section with patience. When the paperwork was complete, Charles stood and walked to a wall safe hidden behind a painting. A Victoria Ashford original, Elijah realized with a start. Charles retrieved a small wooden box, weathered and beautiful, and placed it in Elijah's hands. Your father left this for you, Charles said softly, with instructions that I give it to you personally when we meet. Elijah's hands trembled as he opened it. Inside was a letter, handwritten, the paper yellowed slightly with age, and a photograph. The photo showed Jonathan holding a newborn baby, his face a mask of mingled love and devastation. The baby was wrapped in a blue blanket, tiny and perfect. Elijah touched the image, tears blurring his vision. This is me. That's you, Charles confirmed. 3 days old. He held you for hours before the adoption was finalized. With shaking hands, Elijah unfolded the letter. My son, if you're reading this, you've reached 18, and you've learned the truth about your origins. I hope you can forgive the choices I made, giving you to strangers, leaving you this money as if wealth could substitute for a father's presence. The truth is, I was a coward. When your mother died bringing you into this world, something in me shattered beyond repair. Every time I looked at you, I saw her eyes, her smile, the life we should have had together. The pain was unbearable. I know this is no excuse. I know I failed you in every way that matters. But please understand, I loved you. I loved you so much that I knew keeping you would destroy us both. You deserved better than a broken man drowning in grief. You deserved a real childhood, real parents who could give you the love I no longer had to offer. The money is my apology and my hope for you. Use it to build the life your mother and I dreamed of giving you. Go to the best schools. Travel the world. Create art, cure diseases, change lives. Do all the things we'll never do. In the box, you'll find your mother's wedding ring. She wore it the day she died. I want you to have it, to know that you came from love, real, powerful, all-consuming love. Even if that love led to tragedy. I'm sorry I won't be there to see the man you become. I'm sorry for all the birthdays I'll miss, all the conversations we'll never have. But I believe in you, even from wherever I am now. Make your life extraordinary. With all the love a broken father can give, Jonathan. Elijah couldn't breathe through the tears. He set the letter down and reached into the box again, finding a delicate gold band with a small diamond. Simple, elegant, worn smooth by years on his mother's hand. Charles handed him tissues, his own eyes misty. They loved you, he said firmly. Never doubt that. The circumstances were impossible, but the love was real. Elijah wiped his face, trying to compose himself. What do I do now? That's entirely up to you, Charles said. You could go to college anywhere in the world. Start a business. Travel. Live quietly or make a tremendous noise. The resources are there for whatever path you choose. What about Robert and Margaret? The question escaped before Elijah could stop it. Charles's expression softened with understanding. What about them? They're not my real parents, Elijah said. But the words felt wrong even as he spoke them. But they raised me. They fed me and clothed me and put up with teenage me being an absolute nightmare sometimes. They're afraid I'll leave them now. Will you? Elijah thought about it, really thought about it. The anger he'd felt 3 days ago had cooled into something more complex. I don't know, he admitted. Part of me wants to run as far as this money will take me. Part of me feels like I owe them something. You don't owe them anything, Charles said carefully. But perhaps the question isn't about obligation. Perhaps it's about what kind of man you want to be. Elijah drove home as sunset painted the sky in shades of fire. The house looked the same, modest, familiar, absolutely unchanged despite everything that had transformed. He sat in the driveway for 10 minutes, gathering courage, before finally walking inside. Robert and Margaret were in the living room, looking like they hadn't moved in days. When Elijah entered, they both stood, faces etched with hope and fear in equal measure. I met with the lawyer, Elijah said without preamble. It's all real. The money, the properties, everything. Margaret's face crumpled. So you're leaving? I don't know yet, Elijah said honestly. He pulled out the photograph of Jonathan holding him and set it on the coffee table. This is my biological father. He was broken by grief and couldn't raise me. He made sure I went to people who could. Robert picked up the photo, studied it with an expression Elijah couldn't quite read. He looks like you. Same eyes. Yeah. Elijah sat down, suddenly exhausted. I spent all night being angry at you both. For lying. For keeping secrets. For being afraid of losing me instead of trusting me with the truth. We're sorry, Margaret whispered. We were selfish and scared and… Let me finish, Elijah interrupted gently. I was angry, but then I read the letter my biological father left me. And I realized something. He gave me up because he couldn't be what I needed. You took me in because you wanted to be what I needed. Those are different kinds of love, but they're both real. Tears streamed down Margaret's face. We do love you, Elijah. We always have. I know. And he did know with sudden clarity. You're not perfect. You made mistakes. But you showed up. Every single day for 18 years you showed up. That has to count for something. Robert's voice was rough with emotion. What happens now? Elijah took a deep breath. Now we figure out how to be honest with each other. No more secrets. No more fear. If we're going to be a family, whatever that means, it has to be built on truth. Can we? Margaret asked. Can we still be a family? Elijah thought about Jonathan's letter, about Victoria's ring in his pocket, about 2 parents he'd never know who'd loved him enough to let him go. He thought about the people in front of him, flawed, frightened, human, who'd loved him enough to stay. I think so, he said finally. But it'll be different now. It has to be. They talked through the night, really talked, perhaps for the first time ever. Robert and Margaret shared what little they knew about the adoption. The lawyer's visits, the fear that had governed their decisions. Elijah shared his plans, still forming college, yes, but also travel. Using some of the money to fund scholarships to help other kids in foster care or adoption situations. Finding ways to honor the parents who'd given him life and the parents who'd given him childhood. I'm not going to pretend the money doesn't change things, Elijah admitted as dawn approached. It does. But it doesn't have to change everything. You're still the people who taught me to ride a bike and helped me with homework and embarrassed me at parent-teacher conferences. Margaret laughed through tears. We were pretty embarrassed. The worst, Elijah agreed, smiling. But you were there. That matters. 3 months later, Elijah stood in the bedroom of the Beacon Hill house. His house now, legally, though it still felt like trespassing. Charles had arranged for it to be cleaned and prepared, and now Elijah walked through rooms where his biological parents had lived and loved and lost everything. Victoria's studio was on the 3rd floor, north-facing windows flooding the space with perfect light. Her easel still stood in the corner, a canvas half-finished. Abstract shapes in blues and golds that seemed to dance with possibility. Elijah touched the dried paint, feeling the texture of dreams interrupted. In Jonathan's study, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves held leather-bound volumes and medical journals. A desk drawer yielded photographs. Victoria laughing at a cafe in Paris. The two of them at their wedding, incandescent with joy. Victoria pregnant, glowing, one hand on her belly where Elijah grew. He sat at his father's desk and wept, for the parents he'd never know, for the life they should have had, for the weight of inheritance that was both a gift and a burden. But when the tears subsided, Elijah pulled out his phone and called Margaret. Hey, Mom, he said, and felt the words settle into truth. Biology didn't make a family. Love did. Choice did. Showing up day after day did. Elijah. Margaret's voice brightened. How's the house? Beautiful, said. Full of ghosts. He looked around the study. But I was thinking, what if we turned it into something? A scholarship foundation headquarters. A place to help kids who've lost parents, who've been adopted, who are trying to figure out who they are. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then, that sounds perfect. They'd be proud of you. Which parents? Elijah asked, but he was smiling. All of us, Margaret said firmly. All of us would be proud. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Elijah walked to the window, looked out at Boston spreading below. A city of endless possibilities, of past and future intertwined. He thought about Jonathan's letter, about using the money to build an extraordinary life. Not just for himself, but for others who carried the same wounds, the same questions, the same need to know they weren't alone. I'm going to need help, he said. Setting up the foundation, making it real. Would you and Robert? Would you want to be part of it? He heard Margaret's sharp intake of breath. You want us involved? You've been involved since the beginning, Elijah said. Since the moment you decided to take a chance on a 3-day-old baby. I'm just asking you to keep showing up. Always, Margaret promised, her voice thick with emotion. We'll always show up. After the call ended, Elijah remained at the window, watching light shift across the city. He wore his mother Victoria's ring on a chain around his neck, a reminder of where he'd come from. In his wallet was a photo of Robert and Margaret, laughing at his high school graduation, a reminder of where he'd grown. 2 sets of parents, 2 kinds of love, and him in the middle, finally understanding that he didn't have to choose. He could honor both. He could be both, the child of tragedy and the child of choice, the inheritor of millions and the boy who'd grown up in a modest house where love mattered more than money. The Elijah Grant Foundation would launch next spring. Scholarships for adopted children, therapy resources for families navigating difficult truths, support groups for kids trying to understand complex identities. All funded by money left by a father too broken to stay, administered by a son determined to transform grief into grace. Elijah touched the window glass, cool against his palm. Outside, the city pulsed with life. Millions of stories, millions of ways to be human and flawed and brave. His story was just one among many, but it was his, completely, entirely his. And for the first time since learning the truth, Elijah felt something that wasn't anger or confusion or grief. He felt ready, ready to honor the past, ready to build the future, ready to be exactly who he was, son of Jonathan and Victoria, son of Robert and Margaret, inheritor of love and loss and 85 million possibilities. He pulled out his phone one more time and texted both sets of parents. One in heaven, one at home. Thank you. For everything. I'll make you proud. Then Elijah Grant, 18 years old and newly awake to the complexity of family, walked out of the Beacon Hill house and into his extraordinary life.